Welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia Baranovsky-Schneider, the podcast that takes you on a journey around the world to meet some of the most inspiring and accomplished individuals. Discover their stories, uncover invaluable business lessons from their paths to success, and gain exclusive insights on how to apply their strategies to elevate your life and business.
I'm your host, Patty Baranovsky-Schneider. Today, I'm joined by Christian Ray Flores, an international recording artist, entrepreneur, and life coach with a captivating story that spans 4 continents and multiple cultures. So welcome, Christian. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Patty. It's hard to tell you a little bit about myself without confusing people. So the short version of it, I think, like the 20-second version would be that I'm this very strange multinational kind of guy. I was a refugee at age 5, and I basically changed several countries by age 7. It was Latin America and Germany and Russia and Africa, and I grew up in Africa, and then I came back to Russia. And from all these sort of turns and twists, I experienced a lot of, hardship, strange civil unrest, military coups, and then surprisingly became a pop star, after getting a master's degree in economics. So it's very, very confusing. And basically my last 20 years I've been in the US, and I've started several companies. I do performance coaching. I do digital media, like brand strategy. And we have a nonprofit in Africa where I grew up, where we help children get out of poverty. So that's I think it was a little bit more than 20 seconds.
Wow. No, I think that was awesome. I mean, you definitely jack of all trades. I thought that was me. You definitely taught me. Now, I guess you speak about building an exponential life. So can you explain what that means and how someone can start that journey?
Yeah, I sort of stumbled upon this thing because I had such an abnormal life. So when I sort of entered places like, Eastern Europe or even the United States, I realized that your environment really shapes you, even if you're in a very prosperous situation, into a bit of a conformist and a cog in a machine. And that, even though you might be doing really well professionally, and many of the people that I work with do, you end up having this either almost like 2-3 dimensional life, but you're more of a 6-7 dimensional person. And you don't pay attention to the dimensions that are vital for your flourishing long term. That's one thing. It's the exponential piece is really more holistic success, right? We pursue the things that are more flashy, more short term. They end up catching up with us and harming us in the long run. And then the other thing is exponential means you keep growing and expanding over time. And that's actually not normal. Even if you look at extremely successful careers, you have this sort of up and to the right graph where people really do well and they plateau. And then they actually stay in the plateau way too long, unfortunately. And that's where sort of a lot of the midlife crises happen, right? You just go, I don't even know what I want anymore. And life gets complex and multidimensionally sort of plateaued, and people just get stuck. And I really hate to see people not expand, not succeed, not flourish for life. And there are very specific ways where you can actually. So, and that's sort of, I think it's a beautiful thing and good news for everybody.
I think that's very well said. I mean, definitely nice. And it is true. People get stuck. They don't know. I mean, it's kind of like generation after generation. You just conform to what you were told to do. Like, back in the day was, work hard, have a home, have a family, blah, blah. But not everybody does what makes them happy. And you have no idea, how to function. It's, nowadays, I think people are getting a little more verbal where they're, like yourself, you'll help people, but back in the day, that wasn't a thing.
It was not. Yeah. So it's multi-generational, almost like these dysfunctions that get passed along, from generation to generation.
For sure. Now, you've been a successful entrepreneur, artist, and speaker. So how do you integrate creativity with business success?
As a matter of fact, I feel that creativity is essential to business success because it's really the only way where you can stand out in a very noisy, very crowded space. It's really imagining something that is not being either addressed or solved a certain way. And creativity is central to that. And that's sort of one of the reasons why I really love telling people, look, you are creative whether you think you are or not.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, you have to find and discover that creativity, not on a sort of this woo-woo level of I just want to start, doing, I'm just going to start painting my backyard or whatever, like or composing music. No, it's not that. It's you have to learn the skill of imagining something that's not there yet
Right.
and
Right.
implementing that. And if you want to stand out, if you want to be successful, that's actually essential. It's not optional.
Right.
And everybody's creative and everybody can get access to that kind of skill set.
Right. It's funny. That's one of the things that I love about marketing. You just have to be creative to do it, because you can have, a clothing company or food, and so does everybody else. So it's like, what makes you stand out? And you have to be creative about it. Like, how do I position you to really make you stand out from everybody else? So I just love that part, and just trying to brainstorm different ways of doing it. I mean, you have to dig deep sometimes, but I think, like you say, everybody has it. It's a skill that we weren't taught to have. So you have to kind of really dig,
I think we're taught out of it, starting in school, actually. So which is pretty tragic,
Yeah. Yeah. Because years ago, the kids they wanted you to have, you know, can't even think of the right words for it, but they wanted you to have a voice and express yourself and whatnot. And I mean, I'm from Catholic school days. You just sit, seen and not heard. Shut your mouth, do as you're told. So we were never able to just kind of branch out of our little shell. We were stuck in the shell. Just do as you're told, keep your mouth shut, and that was it. And so it took a while.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And then you'll have to sort of rediscover it as a grown up, going, you know what? I think I am creative after all. They just taught me not to be that way.
And back in the day too, being different wasn't a thing. It was kind of like, no.
You have to conform.
Now it's kind of like, I want to be different. I mean, and it started with the spiked hair and the colored hair and the piercings and tattoos and all that. And, you still have people who are like, oh my God, they're so weird. No, they're not. They're making a stand. That's who they are. That makes them feel alive. And there's nothing wrong with that. It might not be what what you like, but that's what they like. And that's all that matters. So it's opening the horizons a little bit.
Yes, very true.
Yeah. Now, how'd your personal experience shape your perspective on resilience and growth?
Well, I got a lot of suffering, and that's how it shaped it.
Yeah.
It's the only way to grow resilience is to suffer, actually. So it's the one unskippable step, unfortunately. But I was a refugee at age 5. It was such a strange my first memory was standing outside of a concentration camp where my dad was, and I was holding my mom's hand, and she was passing food to one of the soldiers, to make sure he eats. And you just you get faced with human cruelty, with tyranny, all these things way too early, right, for a child. And that teaches you actually very valuable lessons, if you choose to interpret them. And that's sort of where the skill of creating a anti-fragile life, that's what I call it. There's a term that was coined by Nassim Taleb, and sort of it's a buzzword now. But it's a real thing. You can actually reframe your stories in very real ways. Without it, you're not like changing reality. But what you're doing is you're looking at something that happened that traumatized you and perhaps is influencing the way you see the world now. And you can reframe it by saying, there's something in this that made me stronger.
Right.
And how does this apply to today, to my situation and family and relationships and business and money, all of those things. There's a term for it I learned from some of the top experts on. I invite them on my podcast. It's called transfer, and transfer basically is the reframing of the story. So I can look at living in the Soviet Union and sleeping in the kitchen. That was sort of my bedroom. I had a little partition, and I had a pull-out chair, not even a pull-out couch.
Wow.
And so I lived there that's how I lived for years, right? And we had lines for food and things like that. Just very gray, no upward mobility whatsoever. And what you learn from that, if you reframe that story, for example, that one story, I have so many of those, right? Is, what? Actually, you don't die when you're poor, and you can actually be fairly happy with very little. And I'm capable of that.
Right.
Well, what that does for you, if it's, let's say you're an entrepreneur, right,
Right.
is you are actually much more comfortable with risk
Mhm.
because you don't feel the consequences of failure.
Yeah.
It,
Right.
it doesn't, because I actually joke with my mom every time I'll start a new venture of some sort.
Mhm.
She was like, "What are you doing? This is risky." And I'll go, "Is it going to be worse than the Soviet Union?" She goes, "No." I said, "Well, there you go. It's not as bad as you think."
Right.
So one great advantage that comes from suffering is you can find in it your ability to endure the hardship,
Mhm.
and then the fear of whatever it is that you're facing today is diminished because it's usually exaggerated by your brain.
Right.
So you're much more bold, more courageous, you're more decisive, you're less freaked out.
Right.
And if you want to build any new future, as a matter of fact, it could be improving your career or writing a book or changing industries or starting a business, you need those muscles
Right.
to succeed. People don't exercise them, they don't develop them, and they don't live out their dreams as a result.
Right. No, I agree with you 100% about changing the narrative. Like, I actually wrote a book, Life's Obstacles Can Be Your Greatest Motivators, because I always hated
Yeah,
when people judge a book by its cover and they look at me and they're like, oh, she's always had life handed to her, probably came with a silver spoon in her mouth, blah, blah. You have no clue what I've gone through.
of course
And
not.
it wasn't that I wanted to air my dirty laundry out with everything. I just wanted people to know, one, you're not alone if you're dealing with stuff, but two, you can pull through this. But it's again how you change the narrative. And it's like you look at that as, it made me strong, it made me resilient, blah blah blah. But I could have been like, oh my god, my life sucks, look at all that, or you could look at it as a positive.
Yeah,
It's built me
yeah,
who I am. So I agree 100%. It's not something they teach them in school, but it's something that really can make or break someone, change that narrative.
I agree. Absolutely. It's such a treasure to be able to reframe the story because we live out the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
That's how humans make sense of the world. So if you don't reframe a story that keeps you down,
Yeah.
essentially. So maybe you were even a victim,
Right.
but it doesn't mean you remain a victim, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you refuse to be a victim and you reframe that story and you understand that you actually have more strength than you were capable, that you even
Right.
thought, you don't freak out, you become this courageous, bold, creative individual.
Right.
And most of us actually succumb to fear in a very chronic, repetitive way, and that's why we don't live out our dreams, and we
Yeah.
sort of you live in this state of quiet desperation. With
Right.
I don't know, somebody wrote that. I don't remember who it was, but that's a phrase that terrifies me. I do not want to live a life of quiet desperation. I
No, I
refuse
know.
to.
But there are people who do, like you say, they don't, like I always call them negative Nancy, they're always negative, always down, and
Yeah,
never see the
yeah,
positive in anything. And it's like, well, that's going to be your life if you can't find the light at the end of that tunnel. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Now tell us, what role does faith play in your professional and personal life? And how do you suggest others incorporate it into their lives?
That's a that's a really deep question. One of the core, almost like a backbone of my performance coaching is this longitudinal study by Harvard. It's called the Harvard Study of Human Development. And it's sort of super famous, right? It's been around for over 80 years. It's incredibly thorough. And it follows people around for now several generations of people and determines what are the top factors of what makes people healthier, wealthier, live longer, happier, all of those things. And it turns out, and it's a completely secular study, right? It has nothing to do with religion or anything like that. It turns out that faith or a transcendent practice is one of the top four things, basically. So, and the way it's easy for you to grasp, even if you're not a faith person, and I'm a Christian, I'm very devout Christian, it's the most important thing in my life, is that if you think of yourself as the center of the universe, you're probably not going to do well long term. And it's also sort of sad and pathetic, right?
Yeah.
If that's that you're hyper focusing on
The
yourself.
world revolves around you. Yeah.
It's just it really is not inspiring at all.
Right.
But if you develop an actual practice, a spiritual practice, it could be prayer, contemplation, meditation, and it's regular, right? So it's an essential part of your life. What you're teaching yourself to be is metacognitive, is have this ability to objectively see yourself, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, almost like being outside of yourself a little bit.
Right.
And then going, you know what, you're really obsessing over the wrong things, and being able to change the way you feel and the way you think on command. That honestly can only be done if you have a spiritual practice, if you have
Right.
metacognition as a result of this practice. And to me, that's a wonderful gift that most people can have. It's free. All you have to do is just practice, figure out what you're going to do.
Right.
For me, it's sort of journaling, prayer, meditation, contemplation, nature. Like that's almost like the cluster of spiritual practices. There's Sabbathing. I Sabbath every week, so it's a day off day of a complete release of duties, and the list of to-do lists is never done, but it's a day of complete joy, relaxation, and
Nice.
delight. And that's a spiritual practice, right?
Right.
And it is focused on the fact that you're not the source of all of life, bottom line.
Yeah.
So if you actually devote a day to actually asserting that, even with your body, where you just
Right.
refuse to do work,
Yeah.
it's a tremendous asset
Right.
for life.
And think even just like a mental thing, because, if you sit here and say, oh my God, all these bad things keep happening. Oh, every client I have does this, right? But if you like kind of come outside of that and say, there's a reason for it. You don't control it. There's a reason for it. It takes a little bit of that pressure off, like, whew, I thought it was just me, but it's not,
Exactly. Yeah.
so it's a good mental thing too. But I agree,
Yeah.
somebody, everybody who has whether their own beliefs in their own way, it kind of puts a lot of life into perspective, if anything,
did.
it gives you
It's perspective. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's you're developing the ability to have perspective about yourself, your place in the world, where you're going, all of those things. And it's an incredible superpower if you
Mhm.
actually develop that as a skill.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Now tell us, you work with diverse groups globally. So how do you leverage diversity to foster growth and innovation?
Well, I think it's a huge advantage in the sense that, okay, let me sort of take this point of view. It used to be that specialists rule the world. That's the perception, and probably perhaps to a degree a reality, right? In America. So you go deep, you know your lane, you become the expert on this and this and this and this. There's tons of data now that basically say the opposite, that generalists are the ones who rule the world. If you look at some of the greatest sort of inspirations in business and the arts and other areas of human flourishing, you will see that the people that we admire the most, they dabbled in a number of things before they became the thing that they are known for, right? So they're known for whatever, launching Facebook or Apple, or we're going. The tech world for some reason dominates our imagination in America because of the billions and billions that come to the people that do that. But let's say Steve Jobs, he dabbled in the arts and calligraphy. He's not even a computer coder. Like he infused expertise of aesthetics and minimalism into very clunky computer technology at the time. And anywhere you go, you will find people that inspire you. They usually are generalists, and they have all these diverse, on the surface, incongruent even experiences. So for me, I was just blessed, and it was in the beginning it felt like a curse because we're literally exiles. We're running for our lives, and I moved 4 countries by age 7, right? And it's in drastically different cultures. So, I mean, imagine Eastern Europe, Latin America, and Africa. I mean, they have
Jesus.
nothing in common whatsoever,
Exactly.
right? So it's 3 different continents, and
At a young age.
at a young age. And so I'm so confused because people talk differently, they look differently, the languages are different, body language, cultural nuance, all of that is. I was so confused that my dad actually told me when I moved to Africa that I went quiet for a year. Like I just wouldn't speak in public.
Right.
I just withdrew, right? I just shrunk. And I said, what do you think that is? And he said, I asked you because I was concerned. And he said, you told me that I I don't speak the any language well. Like, like what I was expressing is that it's too much,
Yeah.
I don't know how to fit in. And but I got over it. And what happens is that I ended up learning, 4 languages by age 9.
Oh,
But besides the languages, it's sort of being around such drastically different people. So their values, their culture, their music, their aesthetics, right? All of those things are so different, and they get absorbed, especially by a child.
right.
You absorb things through your pore, you learn through immersion when you're a kid. They get sort of absorbed in ways that are incomparable, honestly, to, let's say, going to countries from country to country as an adult, for example,
Right.
right? And what it gave me is it gave me this very eclectic thinking, like the way I think uh, in every career that I've attempted. Usually people go, how did you come up with this? And I go, I don't know, actually,
Right.
and it comes from that origin story, I think. So I think the more you expose yourself to different cultures, different ways of thinking, the more, even disciplines, right?
Yeah.
Completely different disciplines. It's very valuable. And I think the new generation actually gets that, because it used to be, especially in the first world and in the West, in America, let's say, you would, go to college to be an engineer, and you would start it in a company, and then you would retire in 35 years with a Rolex or something. That was the thing. And there was safety in it, and there was sort of this, deterministic path in it. And now that world is gone. Like, there's just no such safety. There's no
Yeah.
pensions anymore.
Right.
And also, it's boring if you think about it, right? It's really depressing and boring, at least to me, because I come from a very eclectic sort of ADHD type place. And I think the new generation now chooses to literally go this way for a few years and then do something either adjacent or completely different for a few
Right.
years, and gather experiences and impressions and skills that don't come from this almost like specialist path.
Right.
And I think we're going to see an explosion of creativity, and I think we are seeing it, and just tremendous explosion of human potential now, because this is just reality now. This is just so normal now. It used to be weird, right, to be like that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like I'm like such a creature of habit. Like I stayed at one job for 16 years until they closed, went to another job 6 years till they closed. But I think because I always work on the agency side and I'm all doing all different things, that it wasn't the same. But
Yeah.
it's funny because nowadays I was always told that like on a resume, if you're at the same job more than 4 years, they don't even want to look at you. They want the people who bounce around, and because now you have this, you know, this
Yeah,
diverse
yeah,
background, and I'm like,
yeah,
I have
yeah,
the diverse background too, but yeah, I get it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
they
That's
want that.
true. It's a completely different world now. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Now, can you share some insights on balancing success in business with personal fulfillment?
I can, because I've experienced a lot of pain in that field. So, I
Sorry about all that.
oh my gosh, yeah, it was but I learned so much, and I've been just incredibly blessed in the last 25 years. My very first success was in music, right? I've changed 5 different careers, but my very first one was I became a pop star in Russia, all of that post-Soviet space. And it was so sudden and so abrupt that I went from nothing to sports arenas in a matter of like three
Wow.
3 years or something like that. And it was really wonderful, because one minute you're this starving artist and you write songs in the subway or in your kitchen over like large mugs of tea, and you go, oh, this is terrible, no one's gonna ever like it. And then eventually it sort of snowballs, and you have like 3,000 people singing the song you wrote in your kitchen
Wow.
back to you. It's just unbelievable. It's really magical. And then at the same time, it comes with these sort of very strange, surreal, abnormal ways that you sort of exist in the world, because you are now, everybody knows who you are, right? So if you're in your mid-20s and you are in the age of where you're looking for love and you're interested in girls, and um, when you have like several million girls having posters on of you on your walls, it gets really confusing. because you actually don't know if they're interested in you or the persona, right? And then that got amplified by the fact that I already was super dysfunctional anyway, because my parents got divorced. I come from 3 generations of broken homes. So I literally had no examples of how do you build a healthy relationship? How do you get married? What is a healthy marriage anyway? All I've seen is just disaster and heartbreak. So I became super dysfunctional, and I would date. I was I wanted to fit in as the rock star, so I would just switch women and dated supermodels. I had no interest in them at all, but I was supposed to date a supermodel, so I'm dating a supermodel. Like, it's just so shallow, and I ended up being very heartbroken because when you just don't know what you're doing relationally, right? I just didn't. And this one girlfriend of mine got pregnant. We had a baby, and I didn't even know what to do that, and I just behaved terribly, and I lost her. She cut me off from my daughter, and I was literally had a #1 hit, and I was depressed, just clinically depressed. And it really taught me a valuable lesson: is that you can be extremely successful in one area, and if you don't pay attention to the being successful as a human being, you're going to eventually, that's going to catch up with you, and it's going to really catch up with you and break your heart. And then it's going to, even the thing that you sacrificed everything for, which is, let's say in this case it was music, or it could be business or anything else, or making millions, you're not going to be able to even do that well if you're distraught all the time. And I really feel that people should pay attention to holistic success. And I work with founders and entrepreneurs and startup founders, 3 startups, 3 wives, that kind of scenario, right? And I just didn't want to be that person anymore. And I got a lot of coaching and mentoring, and the guidance just changed me. And I think that's really part of the reason why I eventually became a performance coach. Is that I had this coach and a mentor who literally changed my life. He just taught me how to, okay, here's how you build a family. Like a baby. Like he would take my hand, and I had no conception of that. And he taught me how, okay, what are you looking at in a woman? How do you behave around a woman? How do you treasure and respect a woman? How do you court a woman? I mean, what is courting anyway, right? I didn't know any of that stuff. And it changed me so much. And I eventually met my wife, Deb, and it fell in love, and we had this wonderful wedding, massive wedding, like 1,800 people were at our wedding.
Nice.
And yeah, it was big. And like press accreditations during, at our wedding. But I was so changed by then, and I just celebrated 25 years of marriage.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that generational curse where it gets passed from, this dysfunction that gets passed from generation to generation, I was able to break it. And I think, to me, that the most valuable thing I say to people, and I usually advise people on professional success. And what I tell them is, like, if you don't get your house in order, I promise you don't want the professional success that's going to mess with you. Get your house in order. Learn how to be a husband, a wife, a parent, a friend, a leader, a true leader, and then develop the thing, right? Because if you don't have that, it's going to be very hard to build it. Or if you do build it successfully, it's gonna be much more painful for you.
Right. Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's a shame because I kind of fell into that case also where, things get passed down. And then I feel bad, like even with my kids, because I'm like, I wasn't the best role model for them for that sort of thing, because I was a single mom and they were babies and blah, blah, blah. And, bad relationships, this and that. And it's, I was so busy working because I was a single mom and blah, blah, blah. So I never got to teach them. And now here they are, parents themselves and whatnot. And it's like, you can't change the past, you just hope that, that you gave them something to know that they're good people and that, they
That's
can
right.
progress. I mean, but I hope that the new generations, as much as they kind of, aren't 100% like what I'm used to, but I'm hoping that they can change the way for future generations to be better at, just life in general.
I think they will, and I think we have responsibility of passing that on.
Yeah.
What wasn't passed on to us, we can
Right.
pass on to them. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Now tell us, what are some of the most common obstacles people face when trying to live an exponential life, and how can they overcome them?
Well, there's a few things that I can point out because I I obsess over this stuff, obviously. So, uh, the first one that I usually really, really land on with people is bad stress, bad fuel.
Yeah.
You know, I call it fuel because it could be good fuel and bad fuel, and your every day is fueled by something. We become so accustomed to bad fuel
Mm.
that it becomes this normal thing that we don't even question anymore.
Right.
And sort of, I think task number one is you have to figure out the skill set to go from stressed out, anxious to creative, excited, joyful,
Mm.
because that's the material from which the future is built.
Right.
If you want a good future, you have to run on good fuel, basically. And it's remarkably easy. I'm not saying it's well. Let me rephrase. It's remarkably simple. It's not easy
Okay. Yeah.
to learn how to battle bad fuel daily. And I really believe you have to have the ability to change the way you're feeling in less than a day
Okay.
and win that day. And if you
Yeah.
know how to win that day, you're going to win in life.
Mhm.
So that's sort of the one thing that is chronic. I mean, it's honestly chronic. People are very stressed out. Mental health is fairly low in America in general. Burnout is endemic.
Yeah.
None of these things are compatible with success in exponential living, basically. So the second thing I talk about quite a bit and I obsess over as well is that because they are competing, especially if you're successful, you have competing priorities.
Mhm.
Complexities start adding up. Like if you are a successful salesman at a company, all you do is sell
Right.
until you become so successful that you start training other salespeople. Then they give you a territory because you're successful
Mhm.
until you basically lose direction and the complexities bury you and you don't know where you're going anymore. You go in circles or you hit a plateau because the complexities pile up. You lose direction. When you lose direction, you will eventually lose joy, momentum, all of those things.
Mhm.
So being able to sort of understand where do I actually want to go, and what does that mean for the other things that compete with that, and to make choices that are hard choices, and how do I speed up going to the places that really make me feel, fully alive.
Right.
How do I get there? And then how do I say no? Okay, what is that going to cost me? Because you don't want the cost either. But that's sort of the second thing that I see. That's the obstacle is people get plateaus. People don't know where they're going. They lose speed. They go in
Right.
circles. They just get stuck. And there's ways out of it actually. So it's not. It's not easy, but it's also simple.
Mhm.
The third piece is the internal battle. So it's the voice of whoever, a bully in middle school or your dad who said you're not going to amount to anything, that sort of thing. It's ever present. Whatever sort of stuff that scarred you it sticks around basically in people. And
Right.
so you can have on paper this high aspirations of building something or creating something new and wonderful. But there's this little voice in your head that goes, "You're a loser, and you'll always be a loser. And who do you think you are?
Mhm.
Stop doing this thing that you're doing,
Mhm.
and just fall in line, and stay on your lane. Stay in your lane." And that voice is ever present with almost everybody, unless you figure out a way how to shut it down, how to process it, even when it pops up.
Mhm.
And I call that resistance. So if you know how to win against resistance, you're going to do really well.
Mhm.
And then the last thing is basically what you and I talked about in the beginning, which is sort of this multidimensional way of being that if you don't learn that, you're going to eventually burn out and it's not going to be pretty, so.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because I had a conversation with someone recently where again they just you compare yourself to what everybody else is doing, or I have a family, I have to work hard, I have to make money, and blah blah blah, and you're doing stuff, but at the end of the day, you're not even happy. And it's like I try to explain to them, it's not always about money. Yeah, you need money to pay your bills, but you can have all the money in the world, doesn't mean you're happy. So
Mhm.
that if you're not happy at your work, then that means you're not happy at home. And it becomes this trickle effect. And,
Yes,
there's a lot that's, in their head. You have to do this. You don't have to do anything. You have to be happy. You have to have a happy home. You have to have a roof over your head and food in your mouth. If you can cover all that, anything extra is a bonus, but it's not
that's right.
mandatory. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think so, I mean, I would say easily half of the population of the United States is stuck in that,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
It's
know.
a shame.
It's pretty,
I
pretty
mean,
sad, yeah.
yeah. Now tell us, you often speak about purpose-driven leadership. So what does that look like in practice?
Well, I think for me, look, if leading other people, right? It could be a team, it could be people you inspire through your podcast, for example. That's leadership as well. Um, Leaders are servants. The best leaders are always servants, right? So developing this love for people, whether you know them well or you don't. So there's this sort of the concentric circles of service are your nuclear family, your extended family, your friends, all of that, your coworkers, all of that, and beyond that, it could be an audience, for example. I think that if your actual core purpose, you find joy in this, is to make their lives happier, healthier, you just overflow with that. That's true leadership. You
Yeah.
serve them. You're there to serve them.
Right.
That's true leadership, and it's not charisma. It's not command and control. It's service and love.
Yeah.
And people flock to leaders who have that
Right.
motivation.
Yeah. It's funny because I know somebody else who says, about being happy at their job. Not everybody skips to work every day and it's just great. And, but you do have to have, like you say, if you love what you're doing, whether you don't like the actual job itself, but you love the people you're around, you love the product that you're making, or whatever the case is, it has a special place in you. And that just kind of illuminates around you, and people want to
Yeah.
be around you because you're just a ball of positivity, and it's awesome. But like I said, you can have the job that you hate,
Hmm.
but my boss is horrible, but you can create your own story and make this good for you. And, I've been out jobs where I just, people are so obnoxious, but I had a group of people that I actually liked. I enjoyed what I did. If I had a call with someone and maybe they didn't understand something, and now but after talking to me, they did, I'm like, wow, I felt good that I actually helped them. You can create your narrative to make it work for you, and then you could be happy and positive, and everything good flows from that. So I agree.
Yeah. 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 I totally agree. And generous people attract other people. That's
Yeah.
bottom line,
Yeah,
and most people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad leaders.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, it's just true. So
Yeah.
if you want to be a leader, be a servant, love people.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah. And it is true that generosity, it's funny because I used to, I was always a helpful person, always loved helping everybody. And you just assume, people would always say, oh, they're taking advantage, blah, blah, blah. And I always look for the positive in people. Well, it was one time when I was in a crisis and everybody came out of the woodwork for me. And I'm like, see, now that's appreciation. They did appreciate everything I did. And that just warmed my heart 10 times more,
That's
so
exactly it. Yeah.
yeah, it becomes like a trickle effect, but do good and good comes back to you. I mean, I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah. I mean, that's your reputation.
Yeah,
And reputation is brand. That's
yeah,
basically it. That's what
yeah.
a brand is. It's reputation at scale.
Right.
So,
Now tell us, how can companies incorporate philanthropy into their business
mhm.
model without compromising profitability?
Wow, that's a good question. I believe that in sort of in a similar way where you and I discussed generosity and giving, you're generous with people, people actually perform better,
Yeah,
and they give back and they want to serve you. It's sort of similar with philanthropy, I think. If a business has a philanthropic dimension to it, you know, that is not just on paper, okay, we check that box, corporate,
yeah,
citizenship, all of that, all of that
right.
stuff, right? We just check the box. That's not real. That's not authentic. But if people say, look, we care about this particular cause, right? Let's say I have, that's honestly what I have. I have an after school academy in Mozambique where I grew up. It's called the Sand Academy. And by the way, your audience can help with that as well.
Nice.
It's if you go to Ascend, as in going up, that
Okay.
academy, it's an after school academy. It's a small
Nice.
passion project, and we help kids in extreme poverty. This is one of the poorest countries in the world.
Okay.
And they develop character traits. They get mentorship from people that they would never be around normally in basically in the slums of Maputo.
Okay.
They develop English skills and computer literacy skills. All of those three things will take them out of poverty. It's that simple. So to me, almost every conversation I have professionally, I mention the academy because it brings me so much joy.
Right.
That to know that just a few kids, that's not many, they're going to be out of poverty. Their families are going to be out of poverty because of the work I do for them. The capital I raise, the ideas that I bring. I take groups there every couple of years. So we're going next year in June. But it brings so much joy. It's an overflow for me, but it also comes back with this really acute sense of purpose. Right. So if I have a sense of purpose, I overflow with that purpose. So I talk to you about it here when it can be completely unrelated to charity or philanthropy. And I'm like, hey, can you believe these kids? They want to be doctors and lawyers, and
that's awesome, though.
And they're in the middle of nowhere, and they have literally had no access to computers before we came along, right? And then people go, oh, well, what is that? That's really cool. How can we be a part of that? So it's sort of this. It generates this energy, and I think businesses that incorporate philanthropy as an essential, right? They actually I think they become more profitable in my view.
Yeah.
Because just the energy of the people there, the purpose drives profit,
Yeah.
I have a friend who basically invests billions and billions of dollars. He's a head of a
hedge fund
family office, like an investment group. And when he invests in startups, he does some venture investments. He always says to them, decide where you're going to give philanthropically before you make the money.
Nice. Gives you that incentive.
And I've always felt that was the most brilliant advice from a sage mentor, right? Where they basically says, find purpose, find the overflow of generosity before you get the stuff to be even generous with, know?
It's like giving you a purpose.
Yeah. And I think even sort of saying, look, we're going to give, 5% of our net revenue to this cause. And this is going to be part of our identity. I think it changes the way you feel about yourself, your staff, your group, your team, and how outsiders feel about you as well.
Yeah. I mean, because most people, you could be a company just, banging out lots of money but right away, everybody thinks, oh, the CEO is probably a jerk, just pocketing the money. But if you show that, you have compassion, and even what you're giving back to kind of tells a lot about who you are, and that gives people trust and, all that good stuff. I think
it's attractive.
Awesome.
It's attractive. Yeah. It really is.
Nice. I think that's awesome. Now tell us on something else. If someone feels stuck in their current career or life situation, what's your advice for them to start making meaningful change?
I would say, and this is going to sound self-serving, but it's not, because I have a wait list of people, so I'm pretty full. But find a guide. Honestly, find a coach, a guide, a mentor, and if you can pay somebody, because that gives you sort of total access for an extended period of time. It provides speed, right? Looking back at my mentor who helped me how to sort of reframe my world of romance, or my perception of romance, for example.
Right.
He got me to a place where I was able to recognize love, find love, nurture love, and stay, married in a matter of probably a year or two.
Nice.
Without him, it would have been 10 years. And I think that's a really important piece, right?
Right.
Is that speed matters. You know, if you want to go somewhere, you want to get there fast.
Right.
You just need to know exactly what you want, and you need to be able to pay with money, with, you know, I say time, treasure, and talent, right? Your emotional labor, your intentionality, actual cash, and time. And if you invest all three, you're going to accelerate. And generally speaking, I think having a counselor, a therapist, a mentor, a coach, those are sort of forms of accelerating, right? Um, but without it, I think, especially if you're stuck, it's really painful to stay stuck. That's the thing. Like if you're
Yes.
stuck and you don't know way out, you're by definition so subjective and so self, like your navel gaze, you start. It's really torturous, right? The longer you're stuck, the harder it is to get out of it, essentially. So getting out of it is massively important, you know. Even if you get out of it with one coach and then you switch to another coach, like it's a coach is better than no coach. That's sort of, you know.
Yeah.
And somebody told me, I don't remember where I heard it, but it was the most brilliant rationale on paying, you know, somebody to help you, is this term ignorance tax. Have you heard about it?
No.
So basically, it's somebody in a sales seminar said that, and I thought that is brilliant and motivational, right? He goes, okay, so let's say you want to learn how to make $1 million, right? And you're making 100,000. Every year that you don't learn how to make $1 million, you're paying $900,000 of ignorance tax.
It's good point.
And do you want to keep paying that, or do you want to pay the 10 grand for a coach to help you how to make $1 million?
Right.
Does that math work for you? And to me, that math really works, you know.
Yeah,
So,
when you put it that way.
yeah. So I've paid, you know, good amounts of money on things that I wanted to accelerate to different coaches, because I go,
Right.
yeah, I want to get there faster. Get me there faster. I'll pay you.
Right.
It's gonna come back 10x, right? Why would I not do that? So
Right.
that's sort of my rationale. Yeah.
Nice. Wow, good stuff. Now, anything you want to touch on that we didn't already cover?
You know what? I want to offer your audience a gift, right? Remember how we started off by saying sort of this dimensionality of success that is derived from the Harvard study. So based on that, I developed this scorecard.
Okay.
And I use it with all my clients, but I offer it for free to anybody who wants to take it. And it's basically it's called Exponential Scorecard. And you can go, if you go to exponential.life, exponential that starts with an X, the cool way to spell exponential, exponential.life/score,
Okay.
you'll find that scorecard. It's about 40 questions. It takes about maybe 6-7 minutes to complete.
Okay.
But what it does, it asks you the questions that are derived from that study,
Okay.
that are actually data-driven questions. If you answer them honestly and vulnerably,
Right.
you'll get this in your inbox, this personalized report where you go, these are the areas of life that matter, and you're either sort of in high, medium, or low.
Right.
And it's good to know where you are. Like an honest assessment is a
Right.
beautiful thing, because based on that, you can go, okay, it's first of all, maybe you can say, oh, I'm actually doing pretty well. I need to just focus on this one thing that's
Right.
on, you know, in orange or red. Or you can go, okay, this is not good, and I need to take some drastic actions, you know.
Right.
But regardless, it's good. A reality check is a beautiful thing, and
Right.
this scorecard is developed based on actual scientific data that is,
Right.
you know, it's wonderfully accurate. And I could actually predict, I can tell you, look, if you're scoring between an 8 and a 10 across sort of the most important 7 dimensions of life, you're going to do well. It's just a matter of when. That's all.
Right.
If you're going like 3 to 5 on like 3 or 4 segments, dimensions, you have to take drastic action, because you're not going to succeed. Even if you have like a spell of good things happening,
Right.
you're too fragile. You can't maintain success.
Right.
So it's highly predictable, which is kind of cool.
Nice. And then nobody has to be embarrassed because you're doing it online. So it's not like you have to talk to somebody, you have to make up lies.
Yeah,
You be honest.
you're just honest with yourself, and you get it in
Yeah.
your inbox, and then you decide what to do with it.
Wow, that's awesome. Now tell us, how can people get a hold of you and learn more about you?
I think the best way, honestly, is you can Google me. First of all, it's easy. I'm easy to find. But I have this newsletter that it's about 20,000 subscribers now. And I post every Sunday, and I just try to share freely
Nice.
the best stuff I've found. It could be an insight, it could be a stream of consciousness thing. It's usually maybe a video from my podcast. But I also even add, hey, this is what I'm reading. This is really cool. Or don't watch this movie. Like I've actually,
Nice.
this last Sunday, actually, I usually do like, this is amazing stuff. And then there was one horrible movie that I watched. And I said, and I'm like, please, you'll thank me later.
Save the heartache.
Don't watch the movie. So,
Nice.
So Christian Ray Flores is the website, christianrayflores.com. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So they're like your best friend now. You share everything. That's
Exactly.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Christian Ray Flores. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the channel. So thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia, talking with some of the most brilliant minds on their journey to success and their recommended strategies. Please leave your feedback and visit pristineadvisors.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Feel free to let me know your thoughts, suggestions, and anything else you'd like me to cover. Together, we can make success happen for all.